Edgecombe and Janai Broom have officially arrived in Philadelphia and made some interesting selections for what their jerseys are. So does this reveal something with VJ Edgecombe picking number 77, that one particular number taken by one particular veteran point guard may be coming back for one more season? I'm going to dive into what this shows regarding the Sixers' hand, why I think it's outright disrespectful that VJ Edgecombe can't bump Kyle Lowry for a jersey number, and for Kyle specifically, please, man, just become an assistant coach. That would work best for everyone, I think, in these shoes. But I do want to talk through this whole process here and where my brain got here. So we do know Janai Broom picking number 22. Nothing wrong with that. And VJ Edgecombe, number 77, the first player in Sixers franchise history to ever wear this number. And he was asked why 77. And he said, well, my favorite number is 7. And I got to have a 7 in there somewhere. So why not 77 was his answer to that. But that brings the question of what about just number 7 straight up? And as of now, that number is available, but maybe not if Kyle Lowry is to return, who, of course, repped that last year. We've had quite a few people on the trail pointing this out, that we did get this from Harrison Grimm here, who tweets out, VJ Edgecombe will wear number 77 for the Sixers. This could obviously change depending on whether the Sixers retain Kyle Lowry. Mock up below for the talented, and you can see the jersey number there. I will say I think the 77 looks better on him than I expected. That is typically not quite a top athlete type of number, but it's certainly better than like Noah Penda for the Magic's wearing number 93. So sign me up for 77, 100 times out of 100 there. Now, to bring in the Kyle Lowry conversation, I do want to lead with the quote that he gave in his exit interview here to Sixers media. This coming from Sixers Adam of the Philly Voice here, and it says Lowry in his exit interview on April 13th on why he wants to return to the Sixers. Quote, I have a great relationship with Nurse, of course, and I think the pride of being from Philadelphia and playing for Philadelphia is also you want to figure out how to be a part of something different, special. I think you guys all know how I feel about Tyrese Maxey, and he's the reason that it's just been a blessing to be a part of this because he's such a phenomenal kid and a phenomenal talent. This organization deserves to be at the top of the top, and this city deserves it. So I want to be a part of that. Hopefully I can. I appreciate the sentiment from Kyle Lowry here. I also kind of got to be the voice of reason here, that the Sixers just went through an absolutely brutal season in which I think they felt the pain of having too many older veterans that weren't ready to get yourself through the regular season. That the difficult balance that organizations must strike is it's a different skill set for guys that can survive an 82-game regular season and guys that buckle up for a playoff run. I think Kyle Lowry, even at this age, could bring something from a playoff perspective with all the experience and him at his best, and he certainly has lost a ton athletically there. I don't think there's anywhere where this guy can play at a regular rate through the regular season here. Now, I do think that there's value in having a guy like Lowry who's incredibly accomplished and a somewhat similar skill set to a guy like Jared McCain, and another guy that they've just brought in VJ Edgecombe, who's obviously a very different skill set as he's a miles better athlete than Lowry could ever even thought of being there. But having a guy who's been around the league, has been a legitimate professional and succeeded at this level, been an all-star, won an NBA championship, that I think there's value to having that voice of reason. I don't think that if he moved to an assistant coaching role, that changes, though. That I still think he can be that outlet to the players in the way that the Sixers are designing here. Now, for Lowry specifically, a bit of a different pay scale for a player and a coach. I'm sure that is a factor in it. And he probably still has that itch to keep playing. That I do genuinely feel in my heart of hearts right now that the goal of Kyle Lowry, when, of course, he signed with the Sixers through the buyout market, had that one playoff run, and then came back last year, I think in his mind that he thought that was going to be the last year of his career, that he could ride off into the sunset after helping the Sixers contend or have a successful season, however it may end there. And ultimately, we know how last season went from everyone, that it was a disaster by every single definition, and I think he wants a chance to rewrite that. And I can respect that to an extent here. But once again, I do think Daryl Morey does need to learn the lesson a bit. Now, I did want to talk a little bit more about VJ Edgecombe here because he had his intro presser. I'm recording this Friday night, and I'm straight up thrilled by a ton of the things that I did see from him. And a couple quotes that I want to point out for a couple different reasons here. For starters, this was probably the one that stood out to me the most in regards to VJ Edgecombe, and it was asked about his role. And VJ was asked what conversations have been like about what role is expected from him on the Sixers. And he said, quote, the main thing is they told me that I have to work for it. I'm here to buy into whatever role that they have me playing. And I love this mentality. I love that the Sixers went out and once said that directly. He does feel like a Nick Nurse demon, a guy that's going to be a monster in his system, that we know how important it is for Nick Nurse for generating turnovers, getting guys that are switchable, athletic, can fly around the perimeter, and VJ can do all of these things at a very high level. But that just because he's the 3rd overall pick in the draft does not mean that he gets to skip the line here. I love that he has to earn it here, and I think culture is the number one takeaway that I would walk away from this draft, that it feels very intentional and very calculated in my mind, how much Daryl Morey has paid attention to the attitude, to the personality, to who is the person that we're drafting, not just the basketball player. And this all feels incredibly great to just contrast to what's going on out there in Utah with the Ace Bailey situation, and we will see how that ultimately concludes. I love that an NBA team called the Ace Bailey bluff. I also love that it is not the Sixers, and we don't have to deal with a ton of this nonsense here. We'll see if he reports. We'll see if he ultimately ends up playing for the Jazz. I think probably common sense will kick in at some point, and he will just, suck it up and stick in Utah for a little bit, but he cost himself quite a bit of money and still did not end up in the destination that he desired. So the joke is on Ace Bailey at the end. But in contrast to Ace, unlike a guy who wants to handpick and select what team he's going for, all you get is the most thankful, the most gracious, and just genuine good dude in the room is the vibe that he gets off. That he's got this sweet Southern kid kind of charm. You hear the Bahamas accent kick in for stretches. It warms my heart. Him bringing his family head to toe in Sixers gear. It's what you should hope for in a guy that is going to give it all. Even dropping how I hope I retire with Tyrese Maxey in his press conference with Taylor Rooks right after being drafted. I hope Maxey was on board with that as well. It felt a little bit like somebody dropping a I love you on the first date kind of vibe, but nonetheless, I love the excitement from VJ Edgecombe. And another quote that I did want to pull up from today, it had to do directly with his defense. I know I mentioned the Nick Nurse scheme, but he did talk about his defensive mindset. And VJ said that his defensive mindset was instilled in him his whole life, and that you had to defend even be on the court growing up. Quote, I just hate to see people score, and I hate to lose. If I have to play defense the full time, I love doing it. And I love that mentality from him, and pretty cool to just sort of hear him reflect on that was the baseline of his foundation of a basketball player, that he's like, to even be on the court where I'm from, you had to learn how to play defend. And I love that that's the mentality, and you can see it in his game. It absolutely does translate there. So to VJ Edgecombe, once again, welcome to Philadelphia. He is absolutely going to be a key part of this further movement for all the people that want to talk about culture and that the Sixers from top to bottom need to change things. That's exactly what's going down right here, that it has been quite intentional that for several consecutive drafts at this point, every player that's been selected checks every character box that you could possibly have. Every player that is selected has a good vibe, a good personality, a good energy about them in a way that I think for a long time, this Sixers organization was totally cool with overlooking that kind of stuff in favor of the high upside player. A guy like Ben Simmons, who obviously had all the talent in the world, all the natural talent in the world, but didn't want to work for it. And I think going against the grain and starting to rewrite that sort of side of things from an organizational standpoint is going to be a huge win in the long run here. So while VJ Edgecombe may not make or break this specific Sixers season, he may help make or break what the Sixers' future is. And I think that is the lesson to take from this, is that as an organization, they are very clearly moving in the right direction. We will see if Kyle Lowry is along for that ride whatsoever. So I do think that the ultimate conclusion here is that Kyle Lowry is 100% coming back for one more Sixers season. I do hope that we can build up the other 14 roster spots to a level that they can sustain that and be okay with that. Maybe we can find some sort of player coach exception or something along those lines. I don't think that exists, but I can be hopeful here. But that is my takeaway here. So shout out to VJ Edgecombe. I do think that the number 77 looks a lot better on him than one would ever expect here. I think he's going to make that a little bit drippy there. So shout out to VJ. Very excited to see what he brings to this overall organization. But let me know what you guys think about all this, and what is your level of frustration or praise if Kyle Lowry is ultimate back. I kind of do think that is going to be the case. I'd probably put it in my head like 95% chance that I think Lowry is ultimately back. But let me know what you guys think about that. Would you be in favor? Am I being too hard on Kyle? Give your thoughts in the comments below. As always, appreciate each and one of you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back. Talk with you next time. Peace.